So welcome everybody to today's webinar. We'll be discussing personal brand and company brand and all of that interesting, complicated stuff. We have some incredible panelists here today. We personally at my team think this is a panel that is just second to none. They know what it is to build personal brands. They know what it is to build company brands, and they're going to share their knowledge with you for free. So as we wait for people to join the live webinar and the room fill up, just explain, each of the panelists will share their knowledge. We were sent some questions in advance by everybody in our community, so we'll be asking those questions first. And at the end of the download from each of our panelists, we will hear from you. You can come up on stage, you can ask your question, and we will help you in particular with your particular needs. So hopefully you'll get lots of value from today, and today's event will be recorded and shared later. So when you come on at the end with your Q&A, just bear in mind that you might well be, your question will be shared. And the reason we do that is sometimes people don't know what question to ask. So by you asking questions, sometimes you help people understand what questions they should be asking, and not only give them the question they should be asking, but hopefully between the panelists and myself, we'll be able to give you the answers. So we are the Purposeful Project. We have a mission to help 10 million people start and grow a business. Our whole mission is to help people for free. We're not looking to upsell you or promise you the world and not deliver. We simply want to bring useful knowledge to you to help you in your business be more successful. And anyone out there that's thinking of starting a business, get the knowledge they need to do that. We believe that anyone perhaps who's unemployed today shouldn't be waiting around for a job, but should be given the tools to create a job for themselves and be your own boss. So I want to just, first of all, before we start talking to Sophie, our first panelist, say thank you to all the panelists for giving up their time this evening. All of the panelists are very busy people, but I really appreciate you taking time out to come and share all that you've learned in your business. So first up, thank you so much. In the comments section, we will be sharing every single one of our panelists' bios and links to their social media. I strongly recommend that you follow them all. I do, and I learn every single day. I built 19 companies, invested in 75 startups, and every single day I learn from this group of panelists right here. So please follow them, and we'll be putting their links in the bio. Again, we'll take questions at the end, but let's get going. I think we're now filling up the room. So why don't we start off with Sophie? Would you kindly tell everybody a little bit about yourself, and then maybe anything you'd like to share up front?
Yeah. So I started my career in journalism, working at Sky News and CNBC, and I've now moved on to journalism in, I guess, a different form in the 21st century, which is kind of social media content creation. I feel like I use very similar skills that I've acquired working in live news in the social media world, but I guess instead of telling stories for live news, I tell stories for social media. And I currently work as a brand manager, personal brand manager, which is at Wow, and we specialize in personal branding for CEOs and founders. And yeah, that kind of came about through my own personal brand on LinkedIn, and then I got the job at Wow through that. So it's all been, personal branding has been like a huge part of where I've got today. So yeah, I'm very much a big advocate for personal branding, and I hope I'll show that when I go through my slides.
Well, Sophie, if you want to do a screen share, feel free.
Yes.
We've got some questions that I don't know if your slides are going to answer, but I think the first thing people wanted to know really was, the best tips for building a personal brand. So I guess I'm hoping your slides are going to do that.
Oh, absolutely.
So
got
maybe
five of the best tips I can give.
5. Wow. Okay. So feel free to show your screen.
Yes, I will.
I do think it's very interesting, this question of like personal brand versus company brand. I have personally always worked on building company brands, not my personal brand, because I then feel like it's scalable and I can allow other people to then run the company, for example. Whereas if it's me as a personal brand, it's always me having to do the content. So I'm really interested to hear your view on personal branding, strengths and weaknesses. And let's talk initially about your tips. So over to you, Sophie.
Yes. So I will just give you a bit of context on personal branding, because I still get so many questions about what personal branding is. And I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions that I just like to dispel. So just following on from what I was saying about my own journey. So my personal brand very much began on LinkedIn. So I started about a year ago with maybe 800 followers, and now I've got over 5,000. So I've been using that whole experience to manage clients that I have working at Wow now. So for me, personal branding is, let me just, sorry, my slide's forgotten. I'm just going to break down what is personal branding, why you should care about building your personal brand, 5 tips, the most important part, and then a little bit just about why I think personal branding is such a weapon for people to utilize. So just to start off with, this is a shop window, just in case that's unclear. So people often ask me what personal branding is. And I think a common misconception is that it's just about gloating and self-promotion. And this really isn't the case. And I do always try and dispel this misconception, because a good personal brand is really your competitive advantage. And when it's done well, it's not just an ego trip, it's far more nuanced than that. And it's not just about shouting about things you've done, but it's about crafting a unique brand identity that's shaped around you and all of the layers that make up you. So I like to think of my personal brand as a shop window. And obviously with social media, that shop front looks different across platforms, but generally I think thinking about personal branding as a shop window just is a really nice and simple metaphor. And really the key to a personal brand and the key to a shop window is getting people through the door to see the rest of the shop floor. So that's kind of the metaphor I always use, which I think is a much more accessible definition of personal branding. I think in terms of personal branding, people often feel like they don't have anything to say of value. And I would always challenge that by saying we all have a unique story, and it's just about carving that out and questioning yourself and breaking that down. I think naturally people find it harder to break down their personal brand, whereas if they're thinking about a brand and a product, they find it a lot easier. And I think that's just because of the shift that we've had over time, where brands have always been about the product and the people haven't been as relevant. But now I think a good personal brand is a CV personified, it's a foot in the door, it's like a fast pass to the ride. It's your digital footprint that opens you up to endless opportunities professionally and personally. And I think I always talk about my own brand just because I feel like I've grown my own personal brand and I've learned so much, which I can then apply to clients and kind of trial and test stuff with my own brand that I can then kind of share. But just like I was saying when I was just introing, through my personal brand on LinkedIn, that was how I got my job at Wow. And I would say it kind of came to me rather than being about me like seeking out opportunity, which I think is such a great thing, and just makes life a whole lot easier just in terms of recruitment, and opportunities coming to you rather than always having to seek out opportunities, because just looking for jobs can be such a huge thing to navigate. So I think that's just a really great part of building a good personal brand. And then also just the speaking opportunities that has come out of my own brand, and then all the knowledge that I can now apply to clients, which has just paid off and really reaped a lot of rewards. So that's just a bit of a like definition just to break down personal branding, because I think people hear personal branding and they freak out, and actually once you break it down and think about what that actually looks like for you and all the parts that make up your brand, it's actually a lot more simpler than you'd think. And I really think that your personal brand and your company brand, whatever that looks like, they work in tandem and kind of amplify each other. So it's not one or the other. It's very much kind of side by side. So another question that I think was posed to me was why you should care more about your personal brand. So if you're not convinced yet, I've just got two case studies to talk through. One is one of my clients, and then one is me. They're both LinkedIn specific examples, but I'll give a bit more context to that. So in terms of personal branding and why you should care about your personal brand, I think that, again, another metaphor, just because I'm a storyteller, so just helping to visualize things. I think personal branding is your megaphone, and without it, you're not necessarily kind of losing out on opportunities per se, but with it, you're amplifying your message, amplifying your brand's message so much more effectively. So using James Caan as an example, he's obviously a very established figure known for being a former dragon and a serial entrepreneur. So credibility wise, his brand kind of speaks for itself. But something we've been working on recently is, I guess, evolving his personal brand to what his objectives are now and just reshaping what his personal brand looks like. And that's another point, actually. Personal branding is definitely something that just undulates. It's not like a fixed thing. You know, you can constantly reinvent yourself and change up focuses in terms of your personal brand. So there are so many kind of layers to your personal brand. So just in terms of the example with James, we are focusing a lot at the minute on his business, Recruitment Entrepreneur, and it's a business that not necessarily everyone is familiar with, but obviously everyone is familiar pretty much with James Caan, and he has such a powerful personal brand. So for us with this particular campaign, it was about harnessing that and kind of using that to show off James's latest venture, and just maximize the opportunity as much as we can, utilizing his personal profile on LinkedIn. So James is obviously a recruitment expert, and we do a lot of posts sharing advice and just kind of reinforcing that credibility of him as the go-to guy for recruitment. And in terms of Recruitment Entrepreneur, just for a quick context, he is trying to seek out kind of aspiring recruitment talent and support them in starting their own recruitment ventures. So something we've been doing with James's content is not kind of sales pitches to apply to Recruitment Entrepreneur, but rather talking about the expertise that James has, sharing anecdotes about recruitment, talking about what it's like to build a global business and sharing anecdotes on that, doing posts that are inspiring and that will hopefully maybe inspire someone else to kind of look into Recruitment Entrepreneur and actually sign up for the program. So I think with personal branding, it's about subtle storytelling. I don't think it's, like I was saying earlier about the misconception that personal branding is just shouting about yourself. I think good personal branding is about building up this story and sharing content that adds value and gives another kind of insight into that particular individual. So with James Caan, we've been focusing on the content that we've been pushing out, so that we can fulfill the overarching objectives of Recruitment Entrepreneur as a business. So even though that's obviously a business in itself, we've made it very personal and brought James to the forefront of that, which I think is where personal branding can be incredibly powerful. So that's an example with James, who's obviously very high profile. So just wanted to give a bit of a context on personal branding for someone a bit more high profile. Then just moving on to me, a bit less high profile. But LinkedIn has been such a great thing for me to like start my personal brand journey, and it's led to so many opportunities on other platforms and just giving me confidence that's then really ingrained my niche and identity in terms of my personal brand. So I've just highlighted here 3 posts that were kind of, I guess, resulted in a lot of positive feedback, not just through engagement, but actually through follow-ups and things like that. So I just wanted to show how putting a post out there that is suited within your personal brand focus, I guess, can really pay dividends, not just in a load of likes, but also in business opportunities, in follow-up meetings, coffees, things like that, extending you to a whole realm of network that you just wouldn't otherwise have the touch into. So the second post, actually, the one that hit 5,000, just for an additional thing, on the side, I run a mental health platform called Rosier Mental Health, and I talk a lot on my personal brand about mental health and share my experiences, and yeah, like to think of myself as an expert in my particular experience of mental health, and through things that I've shared on LinkedIn that people have really resonated with, I've then ended up kind of building up this little mental health community through my personal brand, and then also now I'm trying to kind of extend it and build up a separate brand identity, but that has very much just come out of my personal brand and talking about something that matters to me, talking about something that is very authentic, which has then led to kind of a whole nother realm that I kind of never would have planned for. And I do feel like, particularly with something like mental health, if I had ventured into it kind of company brand focused, it definitely just wouldn't have landed in the same way. And something for me that was really important was having a face at the front of something like mental health, which can be really hard to, there is less, I guess, tangibleness to it. So having a face to it has definitely been one of the main reasons why I think that side of things has really grown successfully. And I've taken on board a lot of things that I've learned from kind of Rosier Mental Health and applied them to other clients, particularly who have mission focused startups, for example. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. And then also just to talk about other platforms. So with LinkedIn, that was kind of where I established myself and felt really comfortable. And then once I kind of developed that, I then moved to TikTok and basically applied my niche and made it super native to TikTok as a platform, which is obviously video focused. And just as a side note, I think I do go through this in my tips, but there's a bit of it's very easy, I think, to apply a sweeping one size fits all approach to personal branding when it comes to the different mediums that you can use. And I think once you've established your niche, which is, I think, a fundamental part of any brand, personal brand, you can apply that niche to any platform, but you have to make it native to that platform. So I took something that I felt people related with and something that was authentic to me on TikTok, and then I hit 250,000 views, which was like so unexpected. And I was very much of the view that TikTok maybe wouldn't work for me, but I really do believe that there's a space for your niche on every platform, but it's about kind of figuring it out and not rushing into it all at the same time. So onto the most exciting part, the 5 tips to wow with your personal brand. Here it is. So I've broken it down into 5 parts. I think there are so many tips that I'd give just based off experience of my own personal brand and also client personal brands. But these were the kind of, I think, core ones that I think particularly if you're starting out, are really important for you to actually be consistent with things. So number one is just breaking it down. I think too many people are unfocused when it comes to their personal brand. And I think it is very easy to just throw a load of content out there and see what lands. And I do think there's a time for that kind of experimentation. But I think in terms of consolidating your personal brand, being as focused as you can is super important. When you look at the creators who have been super successful on TikTok, LinkedIn, etc., they're all very focused on a specific niche. And I do think that is something that can sometimes get lost when you're beginning your journey on personal branding. Something to note as well is you don't need to be an expert in everything. I think sometimes you feel like you need to touch every kind of area, but whatever you are an expert in, that's what you want to hone in on. You really don't need to be an expert in everything. And whether it's being an expert in personal branding, like I would say I am, and then when it comes to mental health, I would say I'm an expert in my experience of mental health. When you think about things, there are so many things that you are an expert at. And I think sometimes it's hard to say that about yourself, maybe, because it feels a bit awkward. But something that's helped me is just having a bit of outsider perspective when it comes to my own personal brand. And when I look at my clients, I think the perspective of me looking at them and working out what they're good at, etc., that outsider perspective is super helpful. So with breaking it down and keeping things focused, like I said, you don't need to be an expert in everything. So focus on what matters to you and be as authentic as possible with that. I think that's what really gets the best results. So my biggest advice for anyone starting out is always to just write down maybe some key themes that you can kind of run through when it comes to posts that you want to write, and keep it as focused as possible. Things are going to change over time, where what you thought your personal brand was going to be and look like has evolved, and I think personal branding is constantly changing and stuff, so that's totally fine. But I think always remaining very focused and targeted and just narrowing down your personal brand into maybe 3 to 5 themes. It gives you something to always come back to when you're creating content. I think the same with brand marketing. Simplicity is often the most effective marketing strategy. So yeah, with the break it down, my advice is kind of breaking it into 3 to 5 themes. And this is what I do for clients and what I do personally. And it works really well. So number 2, fail forward fast. So I think it's very easy to overthink every post. But ultimately, with every post that you do, you get feedback from through engagement and through all of the analytics that comes with it. So just treat every post as a learning process. And ultimately, I think the most important thing with a personal brand and just building that up is the kind of production and showing up element of things. So being consistent with the content you create will long term give you much better results, and you'll start to see what lands. You'll start to understand how you can improve. But I think it's very easy to hyper focus on one post, put it out, and then think, oh, well, this didn't do very well, so I'm done, kind of thing. And actually, if you take away that pressure, one post is just not a sufficient data point. So maybe look at a month of posting and then kind of assess things after that. So my attitude to content creation is very much just show up, be consistent, and then the rest will fall into place. And I think when it also comes to failing forward fast, don't worry about a post flopping. Like, loads of your posts that you put out are going to flop. And sometimes there'll be a reason for it and sometimes there won't. And then you'll put out a post that might be slightly similar and that does land. So I think that's where coming back to the break it down part and having those 3 to 5 themes that you really start consolidating, just really establish your niche. And if you keep consistent with pushing that out, you will start seeing the result. But definitely don't be discouraged if you put out a post and it does just flop, because I've sometimes thought that I've done the most like viral piece of content and then I've put it out and it's really, really not landed at all. And I've been so confused because I really backed myself. But that is all like part of the process. And I think something that I always say at work with my boss is just, it's not that deep. Like, don't overthink it. It's one post, like just move on. So the next one is treating every platform uniquely. So I think obviously there is a bombardment of so many different mediums and platforms. And I think there can be a tendency to just throw your content everywhere and kind of spread yourself across all platforms. I think the key with this is just starting small and slow, starting with one platform, nailing that, kind of understanding your personal brand and what it looks like. And then you can then kind of traverse across when you want to. That was very much what I did with my personal brand. And it's pretty much what we do with our clients. We won't kind of take them on for 5 different mediums. We'll start with one, kind of become experts in that, and then build up from there and work out how that niche can then be applied to that other platform. So something with, I think, taking your niche and applying it to platforms, as I kind of touched on earlier, you can't just copy and paste across platforms. Sometimes you'll be lucky and it will work, but generally as a rule, I think if you're posting the same thing across all your platforms, you haven't thought about the audience, the way in which that particular platform might favor something in the algorithm, or if you're looking at something that's very video heavy, just translating that onto LinkedIn is just not going to do well because video just isn't favored on LinkedIn. So I think it is really important to think about what content do you have and how do I make it native to that platform. Otherwise, it isn't going to land and the engagement is going to be hampered as a result. So treat every platform uniquely, I think, is super important. And particularly for anyone starting out, just start with one platform. I am very much team LinkedIn at the minute. I think it's a great platform for founders and CEOs, particularly founders starting out. But again, see where your audience is and apply things from there. Then number 4 on my tips is strategy, just to reinforce that point. So I think for me, having a strategy for my content really helped me focus. So for all of my clients, I like to create a overarching strategy, which we can kind of constantly come back to. Oh gosh, I'm in a shared workspace and everyone is talking very loudly. Apologies. So
no problem, Sophie. I'm just conscious that we're running out of time as well.
Oh,
I know.
gosh. Sorry, I got carried away.
No, it's so interesting what you're sharing. I don't want to stop you, but I'm also conscious that we've got other panelists and
No,
I know
absolutely.
people have questions as well.
Wrap it up.
Yeah, just please, carry on though. I'm enjoying it.
I'll wrap it up.
Go ahead.
So in terms of strategy, I think you do need a strategy. I think starting out, I definitely see that first month as a bit of a like experimentation trial period. And I try not to think too deeply about everything and the content that goes out. But after that point, all of my clients have such a kind of focus. And again, it comes back to what I was saying about breaking it down. But I think having a strategy that just keeps you on the path and the home straight is just a really useful thing to come back to. And it just helps you have, again, like I was saying, helps you have a focus. And then just moving on to number 5. So consistency. I think the biggest problem with all of my clients is time and just finding the time to create content and build a personal brand, which is very much a full-time job, which is why Wow, for example, exists. But if you are starting out, I think you need to be able to keep it up and be consistent with it. So if that means posting twice a week, then post twice a week. But something that I see that's very common is people getting super excited, just posting maybe for 2 weeks, and like bombarding the newsfeed, and then kind of stopping because they just, life crops up and they run out of time. So I think start slow again when it comes to building your personal brand, because it is very much the long game. It's not about 1 month. You don't just establish a personal brand in 1 month. It's an ongoing thing. So consistency plays such a big part of just that input. And over time, you will really start seeing the output. So yeah, just to wrap up my spiel, I think I hope I've sold personal branding to you guys. I do really believe that it is such a weapon for founders and CEOs. People invest in people. We're very much in a world where people want to hear from people and understand them and know the people behind the brands. And I think the ability to just humanize a brand is so powerful. I've got so much more to say about LinkedIn specifically, but if we can touch on that later, I don't want to take into people's time.
Really, I've made so many notes, Sophie. It's so much knowledge there that you've got, and the enthusiasm you have for personal branding. Thank you so much for sharing all of that.
No probs.
We do have a lot of questions coming in, so I want to get to the Q&A as well. It's my personal favorite bit. I love hearing what people need to know. I think I also want to hear from these other experts here.
No, absolutely.
Sophie, really amazing. I've made loads of notes, and thank you so much for all of that. And please stay for the Q&A at the end.
Yes, I'll be here.
Wonderful. So we're moving on to Dan, and Dan's going to give us a different perspective, I guess, on company branding. We've talked a lot about personal branding. I agree with what Sophie said earlier. I think they do go hand in hand today. But Dan's going to give us his perspective on corporate branding and share his knowledge and experience. We're now a little bit short on time. So Dan, I'm going to ask if you can keep it to around 5 minutes, just so we can get to everybody else and then get to the Q&A. But Dan, over to you. Perhaps you can share your knowledge.
No worries. I'll try to keep it as succinct as I can. Let me just bring up my slides. I'll just really quickly skip over the introduction to me because you don't need to know that much about me. This is me. My name is Dan. I used to work for the fifth fastest growing agency in the world until I became very frustrated with advertising and ad land and wanted to disrupt it in some way, as any kind of young pretender does want to do. And that's why I made Small World, which is basically a brand centric agency who are obsessed with kind of growing the startups and scale ups of the future, or the startup and scale up brands of the future. And I like to think I'm decent at building brands. I've had a kind of hand in, can't say crafting these whole brands, but these are some of the brands that I've worked with either through agency or actually personally working client side at Adidas. So that's just a little bit of credential about me, and just again, like a touch on Small World. But if you want to know more about us, just go to our website, and that's pretty much the whole spiel that you can kind of get there. But yeah, I like to think that we're a decent agency, and in particular having a focus on sort of challenger brand and challenging the traditional ad model as well. Cool. So yeah, I'll go through the sort of questions that Simon's gave me in as quick a fashion as possible. The first one was really about the first step in sort of creating a company brand and how important it is designing your brand. And I think every company brand boils down to two first steps: brand strategy and brand design. You need both of these things to be successful, and the strategy will always inform the design. That said, what you should do first is build a minimum viable brand. So those of you who are kind of aware of startup thinking will see how I've kind of hijacked the term minimum viable product and just stuck brand in there. You should try and get something off the ground, a sort of brand identity, strategy and identity as quick as you can. And there's some brilliant tools out there, like the Google Brand Sprint. So we have our own kind of proprietary sprint that we use called the Small World process, and that's how we kind of approach company brands for startups and scale ups. But there's some really great free tools out there that you can use as well. So the Google Brand Sprint is one, and it's a 3-hour workshop that at the end of that you should have a pretty coherent starting brand strategy from, and then you can use that to inform a design brief with any kind of self-respecting designer who should be able to sort of knock together the elements of a sort of initial company brand. The main thing to know about brand isn't a noun. Brand is kind of a living thing. Brand is a relationship with your consumer, so it will constantly be evolving and constantly changing. So don't think that the first thing that you put out there is the last thing that people are ever going to see and the whole thing that is built there. Your brand is so much more than a logo. It's all of the elements that go behind that. And it's really important that you know that and you focus on that, and you don't put too much weight either way on, saying, oh, I don't quite like the logo right now. Chances are, if you're going to be a really successful business that has hyper growth and scales, you're going to completely rip that up within the first year and change it completely. Go look at Airbnb's first ever logo if you don't believe me, and compare it to what they have now. It's a totally different ballpark. So what does that include? Brand strategy kind of includes your mission, vision, purpose, competitor review, your audience values, tone of voice. You can kind of, again, if you look at the Google brand sprint, it kind of explains a little bit more about what each of those things are, but it shouldn't be longer than 10-15 slides when you're building your first ever brand book. And then brand design wise is things like logos, colors, fonts, iconography, photography. Again, you don't really need much more than that. Some people go quite in depth when you're paying one of the top brand strategy and design agencies. They have to kind of prove their worth a little bit by going over and above. And you'll see that if you want to have a bit of a laugh, look up Pepsi's brand repositioning. That was like a 70-80 page document that looks at like Fibonacci sequences and golden triangles and all this ridiculous nonsense, basically, to justify the money they spent on their rebrand, which was lovely in the end. Cool. So then we kind of go on to the benefits and the pros and cons between a personal brand or a company brand. So the important question to ask in there is, what are you trying to accomplish? So just like sort of Sophie touched on, a personal brand is great when you're trying to build your career and build your craft. And I have my own personal brand, I guess you could say, as well. And then a company brand is obviously amazing when you're trying to build business growth. If you have a business and you're trying to grow a business, you need both of these things. So you need your own personal brand, which is going to drive leads, drive sales, ultimately, drive business overall. Like, for instance, me doing this right now, this is an example of me using my personal brand to build brand awareness for my company brand. But if you aren't interested in doing that, I think, like Sophie touched on, then why not focus on your personal brand? And you should really make a go of that. There's so many more opportunities it can bring, just other than financial. The people that I've managed to connect to and meet and doing things like this have been afforded to me because of consistently building that personal brand. And it is quite fun. It's something that you should sort of lean into and enjoy, I think. So yeah, in terms of like pros and cons of building that company brand, I would just say, think about what you're trying to get out of it. And if you're, trying to run a business, and you should probably do a bit of both. But if you're trying to build a personal brand, especially on LinkedIn, for instance, so, LinkedIn, we rarely post on the Small World company brand page. We mostly post on our personal founder accounts. And that's where most of the attention comes from, most of the leads. People like people. So make sure that you're kind of telling your personal story. And the last question was just about sort of finding your authentic voice, which I kind of wanted to touch on. And again, I can probably share these slides to be sent out afterwards. But this is a bit of a matrix, I find, like a strategy, as Sophie would say, for kind of finding your authentic voice. This is a bit of one that I did for myself. But you basically want to focus on subjects that you like to be known for, as well as sort of interested in. A good question to ask is, what are the 3 things I'd like to be famous for in the eyes of my audience? So from those broad topics, you can then think of like little subtopics, and then within those subtopics, you can think of like daily posts, for instance, which makes that whole daunting idea of consistently posting one time a day for 365 days a little less daunting, and you can start to plan things out bit by bit. And so mine looks something a little bit like, and this kind of changes as my taste changes and things that I'm interested in change, but branding in general, and then specifically like challenger brands, brand naming, brand positioning, freelancers, because we work with a lot of different freelancers. That's what our model kind of relies on. So I talk about freelancer treatment, freelancer stories, things like that. And then startups and scale ups, because they're our main clients. So talking about growth tips, funding, startup marketing, founder stories. At different points in time, I've added kind of Web3 and NFTs into this as I've become more interested in that. I got a puppy, so I actually added a puppy as a topic in general, which is pretty ridiculous. But on Fridays, I try to post about her and her personal brand. So this is kind of like a good matrix for trying to find that personal voice. And just one more tip that I had on kind of finding your authentic voice before I sort of wrap up. Is think of a person. Who's the person that you're specifically talking to. And in the beginning, I find it easier than thinking about, okay, I'm writing this for the CEO of a scale up, which I kind of try to do now. Just think about, I'm writing this for my mum or my mate, because ideally, when you're writing on LinkedIn in particular, you want to take complex concepts and explain them in a really simple way, basically. And I always think about it because my mum there, my lovely mum, Natasha, and then my mate, George, over there, they're relatively interested in what I do. But to be honest, I'm only going to have their ear for about 30 seconds. So I need to make sure that I explain it in a way that they understand, with like a relevant, interesting topic. And I always try to picture them, or at least in the early days, I always try to picture them and talk personally to them when I'm writing the post. So that's quite a good tip to start with in terms of finding that authentic voice. Always use personal pronouns, always try and talk in a way that you would talk to your mum, or a way you would talk to your mate. And then from there, you can say, okay, now I'm going to swap them out for a founder or somebody else. And those are my kind of details, but you guys, I'm sure you have the LinkedIn and the chat, etc. But always happy to sort of chat to anybody. And hopefully that was keeping to time.
That was great, Dan. And again, I made lots of notes. Thank you so much. Interesting, you mentioned about the pet. There's on TikTok, someone called Harlow. He's become quite famous. The dog's become famous because he balances stuff on his head. And then people have been asking who is the owner. So the owner became famous using his dog as a personal brand, as a product, you could say. And it's really, really cute. And I got to know the person behind the dog, as it were. So that's a really interesting way to go.
It was at the moment when I made the puppy a LinkedIn account that I'd realized that I've fully lost the plot.
LinkedIn, yeah. You also wouldn't think that was the most appropriate platform, unless they've got a lot of deep business knowledge. But I do like it. And yeah, thanks, Dan. I've got some questions for you myself, but we'll come back in a minute to you. But thanks, that was really, really useful. Thank you. Cynthia, thank you for your patience. And Cynthia, if everybody listening is in LA, let's not get jealous. And she's got some great knowledge to share. I think she's personally got over 1.5 million followers on social media. Just recently published a book called Platform, The Art and Science of Personal Branding. And she's going to share some knowledge with us now. So welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you so much. And great presentations. I don't have slides, so I apologize if that was part of the criteria.
It definitely is not.
I was going to say, I have a 9-month-old, so I'm having a hard time keeping up these days. But no, excellent. I'd also say I love my dog. I actually started a company called The Dog Parents. So if you know any dog out there that has a personal brand, send them my way. I would love to work with them personally. But yeah, no, thank you for the introduction. As you said, I'm Cynthia. I did write a book on personal branding. I brought it so I could give a couple away, or like 10, I think, if you want. Simon, let me know.
Yeah, in the comments, if you want this book, let us know. Will they be signed?
Sure, I could sign it and send it over. My signature is horrific, but you'll have it signed.
Thank you.
No, yeah, absolutely. So you guys touched on so many amazing points. And so I think what would be most useful with my time is to reinforce that absolutely both of you are correct from my perspective. I also own a personal and employee branding agency, and I'll get into what employee branding means. And absolutely, pick one platform, start there, great, make your message, focus. The benefits are all made very clear in both of your presentations. I think the expansion of that is to understand that personal branding is really a means to an end, right? It's not an end in itself. And when I say that, I mean to say that if you don't have goals outside of yourself, it just won't work. So why are you doing it is so important to understand. Like, are you doing it because you're trying to achieve something? When we work with founders, it's very clear why they're doing it, right? They're building a business. And within that building a business concept is we're fundraising, we're, sales, whatever it is, there's like micro goals in the overarching. With companies, why they should get into personal branding and employee branding, as we call it, is because the people within your organization tell a story. And they tell your story. They tell their expertise. They tell their experience working within. And I'll give you a perfect example of that. My background, I started actually in live streaming on the platform side of social media. So I saw kind of how social media works on the human side. From there, I went into an agency, became a partner. That agency was then sold to a healthcare company where I worked as an executive in brand development. While I was there, the company went through a massive crisis of reputation. And we said, well, what are we going to do? How do we keep business coming in while there's this big issue? The brand has a problem. So what we did is we surveyed all of our employees, and we found out that everyone there not only worked at the company, but worked for the cause outside of the company, right? This is a mental health organization. They were on boards. Some of them used to be professional baseball players and wrestlers. And we were like, well, there's the story. We'll put them on the news. They don't even have to say anything about the brand. It's just their name works here. And you know what? It worked, because the business development team, they were crushing leads in their local markets because we were giving them a platform to just tell their story, to tell their perspective, to give the tips and the work that they did every single day. And so that's just one example of how a company can use personal branding within the organization to benefit the brand, to save the brand, to build the brand, whatever the goals are. Another example, once we started Bell and Ivy, which is my agency now, I spoke to this investor, Simon, I think you'll get a kick out of this. I said, we want to help companies leverage the personal brands within their organization to build brand equity. And he said, quit now. No one will ever do that. just stop while you're ahead. Your business will fail. Like, and this guy, I'll tell you, top tier investor in the Silicon Valley. And me being me was just more motivated to prove, no, they're going to do it. Well, flash forward 3 years later, we actually landed our first really big employee branding campaign with Walmart. And we went into the store locations and the idea was, how do we use our employees and the wonderful people that they are in their local markets to drive business to the online grocery pickup, right? So pick up groceries. So we did these family recipes. So if you were in Texas, you could get a family recipe from someone in Philly who worked at the store, ordered online. Here's the recipe, click add to cart, pick it up on your way home, boom. And now you have this sort of cultural exchange and personal exchange, and people are attached to the content. The content saw 1,100% more engagement across their channels than previous content, simply by not even tagging the person, by tagging the store that they came from. So back to both Sophie and Dan's points, people love and are attracted to people. And your company, you've got them. Use them. Look around. Stop trying to layer solutions on top of your organization, and start looking for them within, because your people, they want to help. And if you hired well, which is your job, then you should trust them to do so. And if you don't, if you work at a company that doesn't, quit now, because they will not be successful. In the age of live streaming, from Snapchat to TikTok, you cannot crush the voice of anybody anymore. And you shouldn't try to, because honestly, you'll benefit from it. That's my spiel. I will end with this. Remember that people know what Google tells them, and Google knows what you tell it. So make sure you tell it a lot about yourself so that it doesn't have to make it up for you. And I'll end there.
Cynthia, that's awesome. You also reminded me, I used to own an agency called Fluid. It was the largest creative agency in Asia, which I sold to PwC. And I often get a lot of praise for building that company up. But the number one salesperson in that company was not me, it was our accountant. And basically, she had the most amazing reputation, personal brand. Everybody knew how good she was, how honest she was. And every time she'd go and sit with other CFOs, she'd talk about what she was doing at our company. Those CFOs would respect her so much, they'd go back to their CEOs, and then I would get a phone call about working with us. So, your employees are sometimes totally overlooked in this whole conversation. And thank you for making it front and center.
Yeah, absolutely. Building a business is leaving your ego at the door, right? And building everybody else up around you. So
totally. Yeah, fantastic, Cynthia. Please, I've got a lot of questions coming in, so please stick around for the end. Brian, last but not least, I'm always in awe of creative people. I'm married to a graphic designer. She's retired, and I'm always telling her she shouldn't, but it's an absolute skill I don't have. So I have so much respect for people that have this talent, and you have to work very hard to be good at it, I know too. But please tell everybody a little bit about yourself, and then and the questions I've sent you, let me know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so my name's Brian Hollingsworth, known on the internet as the BKH, which is just clearly my initials with there at the front. I've been a designer for 15 years. I say 15 years because since the first job I ever got paid for was like 15, so you can do a bit of maths there. But it's actually about 16 years now. So yeah, I've been graphic designer for like 16 years, started doing content about 6 years ago, working with brands like barbershops, restaurants, the government, the Kenyan government, fashion, cosmetic brands. I've done content and worked with brands across just loads across the board, you know. So that's what I've been doing my life, basically. It's always a bit dreary going last because everyone says all the great stuff and you're like, damn, I was going to say that. But no problem there. So just to kind of start off in terms of like, what is a personal brand, just to give it a quick rundown. So I like to put creators and brands in 3 different categories, or 4. So you've got your company, which you sell a product or a service. And if you're creating content, essentially you are creating content to stay relevant and to sell something, sell your service or to sell your product ultimately, right? And then you've got influencers, and these people are showing their lifestyle to sell you other people's products, and they may get the opportunity to be able to create their own product. But for the most part, this is my life, and then brands fit into their lifestyle and they can sell you that brand's product. If you're a creator, you're generally showing your craft. I make cakes, I make clothes, I make clocks, I like boxes, I draw on trainers. There's a craft that you're predominantly showing, and people may be able to buy what you make or invest in what you make. And if you are a personal brand, you are the product. People are coming here because of you. People came to this webinar because of whoever was on the panel, right? Whether you knew them or not. If you knew them, you're like, I'm definitely signing up. If you didn't know them, like, I'm definitely interested in what these people have to say. And you probably get a lot of followers after it. You are the product. People are coming to hear specifically what you say. I talk about I talk about content and branding a lot. I'm not the only person, do you know what I mean? But people specifically like to hear my point of view. People send me stuff all the time, like, hey, Brian, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And I'm like, I'm not the only person giving my opinion, but I'm the only person giving my opinion my way. So when you make a personal brand, you got to do it your way. So if you kind of want to make the difference between kind of doing a personal brand and mainly a company brand is that you get to kind of be a lot more bolder when you do a personal brand. But I would always say be bold and be brave in doing your brand, because a lot of the time, especially when people do companies, like when I was working with like a few cosmetics brands, they will try to fit into like how other cosmetic brands look. Oh, everyone's got, you know, the white labels and on the shelf. So you would put them on the shelf and you'd be like, well, everything looks the same. How are you supposed to stand out? The whole point of having any type of brand is that you are distinct. So if you want to start a brand, if you're just starting, or if you're like, however far you are into your company brand or your personal brand, go to at least 10 people's Instagram. So let's just say money, like finances. There's loads of financial influencers doing their stuff, and literally screenshot their Instagram page, their LinkedIn or their Twitter or whatever, screenshot all of them and put them up on a page, right? Use Canva, wherever you can use Paint, doesn't matter. Just put them side by side. And one will be red, one will be yellow, one will be pink, one will be green, one will be light blue, one will be white. And you say, okay, cool. So she's red, she's yellow, they're blue, they're pink, they're green. I've got to be mauve or whatever, right? I've got to be gray, I've got to be black. Otherwise, I'm going to look like them and people are going to mistake me for them, right? So with a brand, you have to be bold and be very distinct, right? So and that's across the board when it comes to creating content, creating labeling, creating whatever you want to do. You have to be distinct. You have to stand out. There's no point trying to fit in and look like, oh, that's what everybody does, so I'm going to do that. No, you just, I'm almost trying to say be yourself, but that's very vague. It doesn't really mean anything. And I think being yourself just means being bold. I was on a photo shoot about 2 weeks ago, and I was speaking to the photographer, and he was like, oh, I was like, how did you start photography? And he was like, you know what? I was skateboarding. It's a black guy, right? He was like, I was skateboarding, but I couldn't tell the man then, which is just like his friends. He couldn't tell his own friends that he was skateboarding, even though that's what he did secretly. And he was just taking pictures of people skateboarding, like his friends. So he had like 2 groups of friends, but he had one secret. And it was like, be bold. Do you know what I mean? Be bold. If you like skateboarding, do skateboarding. I love Dragon Ball Z. Like, sometimes I post Dragon Ball Z on my stories, and I don't care who knows it. Do you know what I mean? Some people love Lego, some people love trainers. It doesn't really matter. Some people love cosplay, but you should be able to put that in your personal brand, and just be bold about it. And it's the same with your company brand. If you are a funny person, you have to remember that everything's going to flow from you, whether you're the co-founder or even in the brand, everything's going to flow from you. So if you're a funny person, your brand can be funny. Do you know what I mean? If you're selling, I don't know, garlic butter, you could make some quirky garlic butter. Look at Oatly. Oatly sell oat milk, but it's very relatable because it just feels down to earth. It just feels like it's their authentic self. It's very quirky. It's very, like it parodies itself. Like, they know they're just milk. No milk brand has ever done that. Because milk is just something that you just go and buy. You just pick up a milk and that's it. But if you read what's on that carton, you'll laugh and you remember it, right? But it's literally just milk. Do you know what I mean? But they've done a fantastic job of being bold, and that boldness is only going to come from someone internal, whether the founders or whoever's running their marketing. It's just being able to be bold with who you are and accepting, like, yo, this is me. And if I try to do anything else, I'm going to get bored. I'm going to fall off, and this is going to be rubbish, because people know, people feel. Do you know what I mean? People are going to feel it. And if you're not convicted, and this is another point as well, like, you got to be, you know, in terms of like picking your mission and picking your values, is like, what convicts you to do what you want to do. So I've been designing for like 15 years, 16 years, and I've been speaking to brands, and I realized that nobody even knows what that is, because branding is like, the spectrum is like the light spectrum, right? You know what I mean? Humans see this, but the real spectrum is like this wide. You know what I mean? And animals seeing other things, and different professionals are seeing some things. So I know the spectrum like this, but most people see the spectrum like this. So my conviction and my mission and my job is to make everybody see the spectrum of branding for what it actually is. And that's what I do every day, because I'm like, people need to know. People need to know. People need to know. People need to understand. So that's what convicts me. So if you want to get a mission and you want to create some values, ask yourself, what am I convicted to do? Because if you don't, you're just gonna stop, because it's like, oh man, this is boring. Nobody cares. Listen, I did a post the other day. I got 5,000 followers on Instagram, which is my main platform. I did a post, and guess how many likes I got? I got 13 likes. Did I cry myself to sleep? Yes, I did. Did anybody see me? No, they didn't. I'm joking, but it doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? It really doesn't matter. It's like, it doesn't matter, because I'm simply trying to teach people. Do you know what I mean? Maybe I should have done a video. I could try it again. It doesn't matter. Exactly what Sophie said. You're gonna flop. You know what I mean? You're gonna put something out that nobody likes. And again, this is one of the things with a company brand and a personal brand. Both of these brands, you are actually going to put something out that nobody wants. You're gonna create a product that nobody wants. You're gonna put some content out that nobody wants, a video out that nobody wants to see it. It's fine. That's life. I've been rejected by many, many women, and I'm still happily married now. So it's fine. You'll get over it. You'll move on. And even like my wife has a company. She has a cream company, cosmetics company. We made a product. We put so much effort into it, all of that. We launched it, and nobody wanted it. Do you guys remember Segway? That little thing that they said it was going to replace walking? Nobody wanted it. Now it's just a thing you do on holiday for £20, 20 euros or something like that. Nobody wants it. So you are going to fail, but you are going to also live after the failure, right? And just to kind of just wrap it all up, like, it's all about the story. So I love what Cynthia was saying, because each of your employees, or even you as a founder, you have a story, right? As a personal brand, you have a story. Any person we've ever connected with that has a personal brand is because of their story. Whether it's Richard Branson, we heard that he was dyslexic and he dropped out of school and he was in the phone booth making calls, holding up the phone booth. We know the story because we heard it 1,000 times. If it's Gary Vee taking his dad's wine shop to 6 million to 60 million. Do you know what I mean? If it's Stephen Bartlett, you know, going down on the couch looking for change in a chicken shop, right? I could tell you so many people's stories, because that's what they kept saying. So you have to come up with a story. I'm not saying lie. You can lie if you want to, you know, no one's really going to care. Or if it's Netflix, right? Went to Blockbuster and got a £60 return fee and we made Netflix. It's not how it happened, but it doesn't matter. People love the myths and they love the stories. And we're going to remember the stories. Do you know what I mean? I'm sure you guys are so familiar with all the stories I've just said. So you need to create a story and create a narrative, even for your company. You know, some of those were personal, some of those were company stories, because we all connect with stories. Because all stories, all great stories, are stories of triumph, and that's all we are trying to do as humans. Even if it's pay the bill at the end of the month. That's a story of triumph. Like, whew, thank God I was able to pay my bill. So for your personal brand, you need to create a story of, this is where I started. This is either where I am and where I'm getting to. Like, we know Gary Vee wants to buy the jets, right? We know where he started, we know where he is, and we know what he wants to do. So your story needs to be a story of what you're trying to do or what you've overcome, right? And that's for your company. You could do that with your employees. You can do that with the founder. You can just do that as a personal brand, right? But people need to know who you are and where you're coming from, in order to kind of relate to you and to listen to you, because they're like, wow, that guy's story is powerful. I can relate to it. That's what you may not try to be doing the same thing, but you also have something that you're also trying to do, and everybody's got something to do that they want to do. Just to wrap it up. Yeah,
I think what I take what you're saying, Brian.
Yeah,
you know, I love the authenticity. It's a word that I think really resonates with all of us. You know, the way you're describing it, you know, I think that's such a key element, isn't it? Like, being who you are, even if you get 13 likes, it doesn't matter, right? It's about you being you. And I still pretend to people I'm not on TikTok, to people that in the stuffy agency world, they ask me and I don't mention it. But so there's sometimes it's best to keep some information from people because they might be like judging you, but ultimately being yourself, being authentic is probably the best bit, the thing I take from your comments. Yeah.
Just to wrap up in 30 seconds or less. So be bold, be brave. So make sure you just show yourself, because there are other people like you. They will like you. And if they don't, it's their loss. No water off a duck's back. And just trust yourself. People usually say trust the process, but trust yourself. That because for you to have a personal brand, or for you to have a corporate brand, a company brand, you've seen a gap. And you've seen what you think is the future, and everybody else has to catch up to you. So I believe like that in terms of social media, I believe everyone is going to create content at one point in time in their life. We're starting to see it now. All the friends that never create content, all of a sudden they want to start podcasts. All of a sudden they want to be an influencer. All of a sudden they want to be on LinkedIn or Twitter or a writer or start an email list, because it's just a thing that you're going to do. It's like you're going to use Google. You're going to do it. We've seen, you know, young people starting it. We've seen older people, 50, 60, 70, and even 18-year-olds do some of the most amazing content because they've got so much experience in life that when they start talking, it's just like, wow, I want to listen to this person because they know what they're doing. And they've come from a generation where they've actually had to talk to people, not just through the internet, actually had to meet people. So I truly believe that everyone's going to create content, and I want to be the person that people come to and they say, yo, Brian, how do I create this content? How do I do this? And it's less about being on a specific platform and more about being on creating in a specific format. Right, we know there's only 4 formats: text, audio, video, and images. And you just have to find one of those formats and just continue to keep killing one of those formats. And that's your only job, is to just create relevant content that connects with people and isn't just there to like collect a bunch of followers, right? So I wrote a book ages ago called Connect, Don't Collect. And that was the premise of it. We're not here to kind of just collect followers or anything like that. We're here to connect with people, right? You don't have to have loads of followers to connect with anyone. You just need to increase your network. But yeah, I'm gonna leave you guys with that. Yeah, I think I'm gonna be over time.
I just have to, like, I'd love to do like a live stream with you where we both just cry over the loss of likes on Instagram. We could just invite people in and we could all have a group cry session over the fact that it's just so trash now.
My post failed.
Why am I still posting here?
I used to run Clubhouse rooms doing just that, where we just come and vent. You know, back when Clubhouse was popular. But yeah, I think it's needed, isn't it? Therapy sometimes around this is an interesting one. But I want to thank all the panelists, really fascinating insights. And we've talked a little bit about social media here too. We actually did a webinar on social media, what platforms to use and why. There's quite a lot of questions coming in about whether you need to be on social media. I think we'll jump to questions now, just as everyone gets ready to put up your hand to come and ask your question. As you press that button, Talia, who's moderating the event, will bring you up on stage. And just as we're doing that technical bit, I want to summarize what I've taken from everybody's comments very quickly. Sophie had so much information and insights, and I couldn't read it all out now, but basically I love the personal brand is your unfair competitive advantage. Think of yourself as a shop window. I think that's a really good way of looking at it. Tell your unique story. I really like that. Subtle storytelling, I think, as Sophie mentioned, is a really interesting way of putting it. You know, you won't walk in a pub and start screaming at everybody, right? You know, you might walk up to one person, get to know them, share your story, that kind of subtle element. and establish your niche. I think is such good advice from Sophie. I think Dan, again, just so much, useful information there. I think the MVP of brand building is really interesting. I've not actually heard that before. MVP I use all the time, but MVP is really interesting. And I think, actually we have a podcast that's sponsored by Taylor Brands, and they built an AI. You can literally go put in the name and they'll generate a logo for you instantly. And we can put the link in here for you right now. We don't make any affiliate income, by the way. We don't charge anyone for anything. That's not what we're here to do, but we'll put that in there so you can make your MVP. You're still going to need this crew here to help you fine tune messaging and so on. But if you just want to get an MVP brand, there's so many different ways to do it, as Dan said. I think a brand is a living thing, Dan said, and I couldn't agree more. Three things you'd like people to kind of say about you, if and think about you. We always describe it in my community as what people would say about you if you're not in the room as well. Think carefully about that, and think of who you're talking to. I think this is a general theme we've seen across all our social media webinars and of course in personal branding. Such a good point from Dan, and a good reminder, who is the actual person you are talking to? Think of that one person when you're making content, or when you're writing a blog, or when you're explaining, what you do. Make sure you're selling to the person that needs the pen. I don't want to bring Wolf of Wall Street into it, but it's an interesting thing. Think about who you're actually selling to. So Dan's insight is so great. Cynthia's so many things here. I mean, building brand equity is so important, and the point that Cynthia made about thinking about your internal community and team and building them up is just brilliant. I have not heard anyone say that, and it's so true. And so personal branding is a means to an end. Keep it in mind. Don't get so caught up in it all, and maybe even enjoy it. Is kind of what I got from Cynthia. And Brian was just speaking, so I don't need to sum up what he said. He just summed it up himself brilliantly. So if you missed it, go back and play it, because I just love the way that Brian has put all the things. You are a product. Don't cry over 13 likes. I think if you put it out authentically, it is a bit of useful information to those 13 people. Then be happy. And if you're not happy, come and join group sessions that Cynthia's gonna set up. But that's really wonderful downloads, everybody. Thank you so much. Now let's move to the audience who have questions. I think first up is AJ. Do you want to unmic and ask the panelists some questions?
Hi guys. Yeah. Firstly, thank you so much. This was a really insightful talk. And I think, to you guys, maybe it's so obvious and it seems like second nature, but to the rest of us, so many valuable insights. I wanted to kind of ask, particularly, we talked a lot about LinkedIn. I feel like the platform has moved very much to that shift of bringing your whole self to work and to what you do and to your professional life and the blurring, I guess, of personal. How important do you think bringing that? I mean, I feel like Brian, you talked about bringing in your personal interests and things. I want to firstly ask, how do you get that mix right where it is a good balance? And secondly, do you feel like there's value in doing things like LinkedIn articles and sort of placing yourself as a thought leader? Or, I mean, that kind of thing takes a lot of time. So I guess, how valuable do you see things like that?
Who would like to take that? I always have an opinion, so I could jump in, but Cynthia,
yeah, sure, I'll jump in. I've just noticed that when you're not thinking about yourself is when the content's the best. So, when the ego is just like run away, you don't even, you're just going for it. Those moments are the most, like the absolute most beautiful. And I'm also someone where if I don't feel motivated, right? So I had a baby about 10 months ago, and I've got this whole like crisis of, do I post my child online? And that's my interest right now. So I've just stopped, basically just stopped posting for the most part, because I don't feel very motivated. And you know what? It doesn't hurt me when I come back, right? Because when I come back and I feel there's like this freedom of, oh no, this feels right. When it doesn't feel right, just don't like, if you're overthinking it, it probably won't work. And then you're gonna have this internal crisis of only got 13 likes moment. To hide the like count, if you don't want to see it, like, do yourself a favor, don't delete it, just hide it, take a moment, step back, breathe. And any content you put out is worth putting out, and it's worth repurposing if it doesn't hit or land the first time, right? Because LinkedIn content could be Instagram content, could be Twitter content, could be TikTok content, like it's all content. So take that one blog post and turn it into a script, turn it into the 5 summed up points, like, you know, Sophie did at the end, and make it a TikTok video. Just understand that, you know, you're not doing it for you, you're doing it for the audience. You're doing it because it's insightful, it's funny, it's whatever it is. It's not because you want followers. And I think I'll leave this and I'll send it to someone else. I always tell people, when's the last time you looked at a group photo you were in and didn't look at yourself first? Like, we are human. We've never looked at a group photo and looked at someone else first, ever. No one's looking at you that hard. So don't stress. Take a time out. Yeah, if it's not fun, don't do
reminder. That is so true as well. Such a good reminder. I would just add, AJ, that I think when it comes to, you know, should you do a blog? Should you do this? Should you do that? I always think you should focus on what makes you happy. It's sustainable that way. If you like writing, then do a blog. You know, I like personally doing short form content. You know, it's 30 seconds, it's done, and I like that, and it hopefully brings some value to people. And I enjoy the process of making those sorts of short form content. So do what you enjoy. You know, then you'll find that there is always a social media platform out there that can accommodate what you enjoy to do. And so maybe focus in on that, as opposed to thinking what is the best way to get the most traction. Because if you can't sustain it, if you don't enjoy it, then it's never going to be traction for very long. That's my opinion.
Just to add to that, I think those points from Cynthia and Simon were great, and it is definitely, like, I relate to that a lot. I think you were mentioning about the personal thing and knowing, like, how personal to be. I think when it comes to posting and just creating content, I think you dictate what personal looks like for you. I think some people view personal in one way, which means expressing everything, but then for other people, personal looks very different and is more about just humanizing and doesn't have to just be oversharing. I think sometimes it feels like when you say personal, it's like sharing like everything and really random things you've done that day. But personal, make it work for you. And like you were saying, Simon, just about making it sustainable and doing things that you enjoy doing and that you love. I think that's super important for actually sustaining long term with the content that you're producing. And for me, I am probably quite personal when it comes to talking about mental health, because my experiences are what I share and talk about, and that's what the value is for me. And sharing that is I start a dialogue with my audience and stuff, which is like super powerful for me. But there's a lot of personal things that go on that I don't like sharing and don't want to share. And I think, like Cynthia was saying, if you don't want to share it, you don't need to share it just to like tick a box of, oh, I've put personal content up. I think it's just more nuanced than that.
So AJ, I hope you got some value from those answers. And did we answer your question?
Super useful. And like I say, when you say it out loud, to you it seems like second nature. To us, it's super insightful. Thank you.
That's kind of you to say, AJ. Thank you. Kristen, you have your dogs in the background, just making me want me to show you my doggy who's sleeping down here. Can you see her?
Oh,
yeah,
very nice.
So stays with me in the podcast room. But nice to see your pets in the background. Do you have a question for the panelists?
I do. I almost feel like I accidentally hacked your show here. I didn't realize it would put me right on the screen. But I do. My question is, I'm on Instagram, and I have built a personal brand for my company. See, I'm already mixing it up. So I use it as a personal brand, and the name of my Instagram account is my company. So separating those as my company gets bigger and I'm taking more of a backseat role is kind of like, I'm going to lose a ton of followers and I'm going to have to find a different kind of following. So like, how do you dissect what you've already created to build the future? Does that make sense?
It does make sense to me. As always, will always have an opinion, everybody, but who wants to jump in maybe and help answer?
I I don't mind. I just want to jump in quickly on the first point. It's really interesting there. You said, you might lose a bunch of followers. And I think one way you can borrow from the idea of a company brand or a business. And it's like some of the guys were saying earlier, right? And not getting too personal about it and not seeing as, a failed post or, well, failed in brackets with, little likes as a failure, and seeing it actually as, something that you're testing and learning on and iterating on. I would say, and it's the same way we approach a business, right? I would rather have 10 leads come into my inbox that I know are quality leads. I'd rather have 10 people in that inbox that I know are going to be deals that Small World could, reliably convert and make money off, than an inbox full of thousands of people who are time wasters. So I feel like with a personal brand, you can kind of approach it in a similar way. And it's what I try to do when I'm building connections on LinkedIn as well. I'm not actually super obsessed about how big that number is. And of course, it's great if people just naturally follow you. But when I'm actively going out there to build connections with other people, and this is not directly translatable to Instagram because LinkedIn obviously is more connections based, but I will kind of craft, I'll say, cool, if I can just get 10 of this type of person to connect with me and kind of engage with some of the content I'm doing, that's far more valuable to me than, hundreds or thousands of people following me who might be the wrong profile. So I feel like you can kind of approach it in the same thing. When you switch over from Instagram, don't be concerned if you're losing those followers. Kind of, set out and explain what your new brand, in inverted commas, sort of personal brand is going to be. And, if you lose some people off the back of that, they're not going to be right for that personal brand. You shouldn't necessarily see that as a negative thing, I suppose, because it's always quality over quantity of connection or followers.
Well said, Dan. Cynthia, did you have a comment?
No, it's just someone once said to me, would you want 10,000 pennies or $5,000? And I was like, oh, duh. And I'm not even a math whiz. I'm just assuming it's a lot more. But yeah. So I think, that was great points.
Yeah, and Kristen, I'll just say to you, I mentioned earlier at the beginning that I personally always worked on building company brands. I actually found it a lot harder to build a company brand than a personal brand, because I know who I am. It's easy to define who I am, and I can just speak and be who I am. A company needs to have a different tone, a personality, a profile. It is actually really hard to build a company brand, but if you do it right, I personally think, of course, they go hand in hand, as Sophie said earlier, I completely agree. But if you do it right, it can be very powerful. And I would say that maybe, there's a lesson for anyone listening. At the beginning, you probably wanted to have two separate things there. Right. So the learning for the audience maybe is probably a good idea to have your personal brand and your company brand. You can feed each other, but maybe now you've got a slight dilemma but I personally think it's not a big deal. If your company is still doing the same and you're still doing the things for your company, I don't think you're going to have much of a drop off as you think. Probably you just need to think about your strategy for what the company brand says that's different to what you're going to say. And I feel, without knowing the ins and outs of your business, that it's probably you need to be very clear what is going to be different going forward on your company brand, the voice, as was mentioned earlier, your message, who you're talking to, that's different from what you've been doing as a personal brand voice. And maybe people will move over to your personal brand, and those that are still interested in the company brand message will stay. And that's my quick view on it. And I feel like Brian's nodding, so he's either agreeing or he's got something to say. But yeah.
No, I agree. Yeah, and I think it's just one of those things that if you've kind of built it as one, you just kind of have to bite the bullet. It's just what's going to happen. You're going to lose some people in translation. And the difficulty, like Simon was saying, is that when you're kind of making a company brand, there's some stuff that you're not going to be able to share. It's just there's a kind of a limit, that you can kind of get to in terms of like how personal it can get, and in the way you get personal. So like, yeah, I like books, I like sci-fi movies, but I can't post that on my company brand, but I can always post that on my thing. So even when you're being personal, it's more showing your face and showing up and showing that there's humans behind the brand. There's humans that work here, there's humans that are here, there's humans that, it's not some robot or it's not a bot or anything like that. It's actual human, and you get personal in that way rather than, it's me and what I like and what I'm doing and my life. No, you personal to a limit. But yeah, just one of the things, you've got to bite the bullet and just work hard to kind of now start building that profile and making it more personable.
Yeah, maybe even tell your Instagram followers now this dilemma you're having. Make them part of the solution.
Yeah,
help them craft
exactly. Yeah.
with you, as opposed to you make a decision on your own. You're doing this. You can explain the dilemma to your community, and they'll help you maybe.
That's
Brian,
fantastic.
I think you're
Thank
my
so much.
muse. Go ahead. I was gonna say Brian's my new muse. I'm just gonna follow him.
I know. The same way. It's also the
Oh,
energy,
geez.
Brian.
Oh.
Well, look. Thank you. I hope we answered your question, and please do follow all the panelists. If you're making these changes, all of these people here will be able to help you by example most of the time. So hopefully we've helped you today.
Thank you. Great.
So can I tell a quick story? I think this is might be super helpful. I met this kid, he was a kid at the time, he was 16. He wanted me to be an advisor to his company. And I got this contract and it had someone else's name on it. And I was like, whoa, like, why is someone else's name on here? And he's like, well, I'm not old enough to be in a legally binding contract. And I was like, what the hell? And he was so interesting. Anyway, long story short, he built this brand on putting a blue dot over his head. And he built, you guys maybe know Tatbrow. It did $30 million last year. He just moved to Puerto Rico, and I think he's all of 22 years old. Just incredible. But he made the anti-personal brand by just putting this giant blue dot over his head. So I think there are ways to do it without, that would fit within your comfort level.
Well said. Well, I think we're going to wrap up now. Again, I want to say thank you to the panelists. Everybody listening, can you do me a favor and put a heart in the comments or a like? And just to make all the panelists feel good, I've been live on TikTok broadcasting this. They've not even been able to see your faces, but heard what you've had to say. We have 2,531 likes. So not bad. We do have some people that like what we have to say. And I think that's 2,531 people, hopefully, that have got some value today, in addition to the few hundred people that have come through the room and listened to the Zoom. And now this will be live on YouTube and other channels. So thank you, everybody here, both the community listening and those given their knowledge. I can't say thank you enough for giving your time for free and knowledge that you've gained over decades of working hard here to help people. So thank you so much, everybody. It's been a real honor and a pleasure. And thanks for all the nice comments dropping in now. And thank you, everybody, again. I really appreciate you and for you all giving back tonight. And I hope to see you all again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Pleasure,
much.
Simon. Thank you.
See you guys.
Thanks for you guys as well.